Minnesota governor and Democratic vice presidential pick Tim Walz skipping the Sunday show circuit this weekend. I mean, he could have easily responded to all of the allegations that he abandoned his fellow soldiers ahead of their deployment to Iraq. You have to wonder, why didn't he? Why wouldn't he? Such serious allegations in any network would have given him ample time to fire back. At the same time, though, we're getting new examples of the governor misleading Americans about his military record. First, Politico noticed on Thursday that the Harris-Walz campaign quietly changed Governor Walz's bio on its campaign website. People, he is still doing this. As of last week, he was calling himself a higher rank than he actually earned. The governor's bio was referring to him as a retired command sergeant major. But as our audience knows, and the Minnesota National Guard has confirmed, Governor Walz did not complete the necessary training to retire as a command sergeant major. It would have required an additional 2 years of service and training, which he did not complete. He retired at a lower rank, that of master sergeant. Some veterans say this is an example of stolen valor. He is claiming he achieved a rank that he didn't earn. Others did. Their sacrifice gets diminished by him trying to claim he did it too. And the Harris campaign, of course, trying to sweep the change under the rug, not owning up to their silent switcheroo. Meantime, the Washington Free Beacon, Eliana's outlet, unearthed a video from 2007. In this video, you are going to hear Nancy Pelosi thank Tim Walz, again, this is 2007, right after he became a member of Congress, for his service on the battlefield, and the then congressman fails to correct her.
He will speak for himself, but I want him to know how much we all appreciate his service to our country, whether it's in the classroom or on the battlefield.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the leadership here.
Why didn't he correct her the way Eliana just did when Emily said she was working class from Minneapolis? It's so easy. And honestly, having been at Fox News for so many years, you see veterans do this all the time. If you misstate or especially inflate their rank, the level of service, and anything having to do with their combat experience, they will correct you out of deference and respect for the people who actually held those titles and did that kind of work. Not Tim Walz, and she even said he can speak for himself. But when he did, he didn't correct it. C-SPAN, the network that aired that press conference, also labeled Mr. Walz as an Afghanistan war veteran on its Chiron, or lower third. To be clear, Mr. Walz never served in combat in Afghanistan or in Afghanistan at all. He served in Italy in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, which was the fighting in Afghanistan. He never served in Operation Enduring Freedom. There is a difference. Now, maybe Mr. Walz didn't hear Ms. Pelosi's remark. It's likely he never saw that Chiron, but it's part of a pattern with this guy. And here we have yet another example where Mr. Walz clearly heard his service being misrepresented and did nothing in real time to correct the record. The clip we're about to play is from 2016. It's an interview with C-SPAN. The host says Mr. Walz retired as a command sergeant major. No, he didn't. Then the host goes on to say that he served with his battalion in Afghanistan. First, Mr. Walz just nods his head in agreement. Watch.
Congressman Tim Walz, also a member of the Armed Services Committee and Veterans Affairs, Democrat of Minnesota, highest ranking enlisted soldier ever to serve in Congress, enlisted in the Army National Guard at 17 and retired 24 years later as Command Sergeant Major and served with his battalion at Operating Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. And I read that.
In Afghanistan, he shakes his head yes. That was the time to do it, sir. We on this show actually do care about completeness and fairness, so we went back to make sure Mr. Walz did not correct the record after that particular clip ends. He did nothing about the misstating of his higher rank. We looked at the full interview. 7 minutes into the discussion, Mr. Walz slides in the truth about Afghanistan, but does not say to the host, I want to correct the record and make it perfectly clear. He just offers up this.
My Guard unit backfilled to Europe to provide the security mission as the 173rd moved to Afghanistan. They rotated back. Our Guard unit moves home. Many of those same soldiers deployed for 22 months right after that.
He does this all the time. It feels like a verbal sleight of hand where he wants, it's very clear, the listener to believe that he was in Afghanistan, that he was there, that he was part of Enduring Freedom, and he wasn't. And by the way, what's so wrong with saying, just to correct the record, I actually didn't serve in Afghanistan? Why wouldn't you do that out of respect for those who did? Because you want people to believe it's true. On Thursday, Vice President Harris was asked to respond to this controversy over her running mate. Did she take it head on? Answer directly to the cameras that Mr. Walz's fellow soldiers are wrong about him? Yeah, no. She gave the most non-answer one can give, just praising anyone who has ever served anywhere.
Some of the criticism has been about your vice presidential pick and his leading the National Guard at 24 years. Vance said that he deserted his own troops or his own colleagues. What's your take on that?
Listen, I praise anyone who has presented themselves to serve our country.
First of all, that question was so bad. Why are these people so bad at it? You ask a pointed question. You know, after 24 years, he left the National Guard. What? That's not the question. The question is, your vice presidential running mate is being accused by his fellow unit members of abandoning them because the unit was told they were deploying to Iraq, and instead of going, he quit. He was the one who trained them, and they felt he cut and ran. What's your response to those men? Okay? There, I wrote it for you. Good luck, press corps, on the next 71-second interview time with her. Back with me now, the EJs. God, it's so frustrating to watch them attempt the journalism and fail at the journalism. But Eliana, there's going to be more clips. This is a pattern with this guy. And every day now since he got named, we have found several. He, as I said in the intro, always makes the mistake in the same direction to make himself sound more glorified than he really was.
Man, Megyn, I got to say that was a real flashback hearing you formulate a question to our debate prep where you'd be like, no, not sharp enough, flabby. But look, with the Walz thing, you're absolutely right. And there are several issues. I think it can be confusing because there's so many different smaller issues within the bucket of the way he's talked about his service. So there are four issues here. One is the matter of his title, where it's clear that he attained the title, but didn't stay in long enough to keep it. And the campaign
he was a provisional. He had the provisional use of the title.
Contingent upon his staying in the service, taking the required courses. So the campaign had to do cleanup duty on its website for the bio it had for him. The second is to his reference of the arms he had used in war, though he never saw combat. And the campaign, again, said over the weekend, NBC News wrote an article about this, that he had spoken in error. So on two things, they've done cleanup duty. The other two things are, did he serve in Operation Enduring Freedom or did he serve in support of Operation Enduring Freedom? He's obviously let folks say that he served in Afghanistan when he served in a support role in Italy. That seems to me less significant of an issue, though these matters have been controversies and issues throughout every campaign he's run for office since 2006. And the fourth, which I think is the most significant of these, Megyn, has to deal with the timing of his retirement from the National Guard in 2006, where he filed to run for Congress in February. His unit got a warning that they were likely to be called up in March. He said at the time that if called up to serve in Iraq, he had a duty to do so. He retired in May, and his unit was called up in July. So he is on the record after his unit was notified that it was likely to be called up, saying that if called, he had a duty to serve, and he went on to retire and run for Congress. And I think thinking about these things sort of in those four categories makes them a bit more easy to understand. But this is not a new controversy for Tim Walz. He's clearly played fast and loose with his title and the matter of his record, allowed people to wishcast onto him what they want to be true and what probably he wants to be true, and has taken no pains at any point to correct the record. And look, national politics is different from state politics. He's getting more scrutiny this time around. And already twice the campaign has had to go out and do cleanup on this. despite not having sat for a real interview or taking hard questions on this.
Mm-hmm. Those facts that you just stated are indisputable by both sides. In a motion for summary judgment in a court of law, you could put those down as undisputed facts. That timeline you just laid out. He filed an intention to run for Congress in February. In March, a preliminary notice of deployment went out. Thereafter, he said, if my unit is deployed, I have a responsibility to go. And then he quit. And then they got the official deployment notice. That happened. However, there's a soldier who served in the role he claimed he had, overseeing a different unit, but in Minnesota, same thing, like they were all together, who says, we were told we were going to Iraq before he even filed the notice to run for Congress in February. We knew in the fall of 2004 we were going to get sent. It doesn't happen that it's just suddenly like, hey, you're going, and then you go. There's a long lead up time for these soldiers. And this guy, a former Minnesota National Guard Command Sergeant Major, Doug Julien, went on CNN and said, we were told in the fall of 2004. Listen.
People don't really understand the concept or the chronological events as they occurred. And I'm going to kind of start back in the fall of 2004 is what we received, my commander and myself of the 1st Brigade, 34th Infantry Division Brigade Combat Team, what's called a notification of sourcing, which is a NOS. We were informed that we would be alerted to go to Iraq within the next upcoming year or time period out there. Start preparing your team. From that going forward, we met with one of the 125 Field Artillery, introduced ourselves, talked to them, and give them a heads up. This is what's happening. We don't know the full particulars, but we will get to it.
The 125 is Walz's unit, Emily. That's on the record testimony from this fellow Command Sergeant Major saying, we were told before he filed that notice to run to Congress, we were getting sent to Iraq. That just puts the lie directly to everything Tim Walz has told us. And that's a way to further sharpen your question even more. Whoever gets first access to Tim Walz, I guarantee you they won't use that or do that.
Yeah, at very best, he's clearly complicit in overrepresenting his military service. That's at very best, let alone was actively involved in the overrepresentation, which I think is increasingly clear that that was probably the case. And what's frustrating is that, I mean, God bless Tim Walz for serving his country. I didn't do it. I don't like criticizing people who did it over, the nitpicking, but this is more than nitpicking. This is really serious. And to the point that you made, Megyn, a lot of vets are extremely sensitive about this issue, and for good reason. And they're so sensitive that they will immediately correct people who overrepresent the extent of their service. And I think that also partially explains why we are seeing people come out now to correct the record about Tim Walz, to offer the facts that the media has been, again, at best, slow to provide about the reality of Tim Walz's service, because people really are sensitive. A lot of people died in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it does make a very big difference in this case. And he's just not going to get away from these questions. One thing that also is, to Eliana's point, I think surprising and doesn't speak very well of the Harris campaign or that entire operation is that this has been bouncing around Minnesota for a while. I mean, Eliana may be a kid from the Twin Cities, but if you follow, I imagine, Eliana, you were already aware of this because people have known this about Tim Walz in Minnesota for years. This has been something that's been out there, and the Harris campaign doesn't appear to have been prepared to respond to it because they're even taking things off of their own website. Like, did they vet this guy, or did they just go off the vibes that Kamala Harris had with him at that Sunday meeting at the Naval Observatory?
Some Americans enjoy using their credit cards because it can be a hassle-free and secure way to pay. But our sponsor, the American Payments Coalition, says that some DC politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. They say the bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. They say corporate megastores will make more money and you will wind up paying the price. Find out more info at guardyourcard.com and consider telling Congress to guard your card while you're there, too. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.